Welcome to the Fan2Fan Podcast 5-Minute Frights, wherein, give or take 5 minutes, we'll try to share something creepy, kooky, mysterious, spooky, something fun and frightful that you can add to your to-watch queue as we all get ready for Halloween season. My name is Bernie Gonzalez, and on this episode, we're talking to returning guest Michele Brittany. Michelle's spooky season recommendation, the original 1932, The Mummy. A little bit about Michele. She's a writer, editor, photographer, pop scholar, and she's also the co-host of the HP Lovecast podcast with previous Fan2Fan podcast guest, Nick Dyack. And you can visit Michele Brittany, 1 L in Michele, 2 T's in Brittany.com to check out Michelle's blog and her latest work. And now time to get into The Mummy.
Death, eternal punishment for anyone who opens this casket.
The Mummy. Is it dead or alive? Human or inhuman? You'll know. You'll see. You'll feel the awful, creeping, crawling terror that stands your hair on end and brings a scream to your lips.
and the good thing with all of these lists, everyone that's been kind enough to put it together and share it, and as much as they fill up our respective queues because they remind us about movies that we should have watched or have to rewatch, they're also, I think, a little peek into, movies that you appreciate. So Michele, why'd The Mummy, the original The Mummy, make it to your list?
Many reasons. First off, I would say it's sentimental for me. I visited Egypt many years ago, and I fell in love with Egypt. But my dad and I had always had an interest in Egypt, so we studied it. He had the Time Life books, and I read through the Egyptian one many times. And it wasn't until I was an adult, actually, that I came across The Mummy from 1932 with Boris Karloff. So it really it's sentimental. It encapsulates my love of Egypt and mummies in pop culture. It's kind of interesting because recently I just was a guest at CocoCon, which is a kind of a sci-fi fantasy horror convention here in Phoenix. And so I actually was rewatching a lot of pre-code horror films. So I actually revisited Dracula and Frankenstein. It reinforced for me that The Mummy is probably the strongest narrative of the early Universal monster films. Additionally, there's lots of interesting themes that we find throughout different mummy films. This is kind of the first one, the first thematic one that's mainstream that a lot of people have seen. So it has that concept of enduring love, that love goes beyond death. There's this theme of the ancient life abhorring kind of modernity and all these newfangled things that have come within civilization and wanting the more traditional, as well as the fact that you get the mythology of Egypt. It's based in fact, it's not complete fact, but the fact of the matter is there's a very lovely mythology around Egyptian life and death, and I think this movie does a nice job with that. As an armchair Egyptophile, Egyptologist, wannabe, whatever. They do touch on the concept of science versus treasure seeker. And that's always been a big challenge over the last 200 years of learning more about ancient Egypt, and the fact that you had a lot of people early on that were adventurers and they were looking for the treasures. And as a result, Egypt's history has been decimated to some degree, and there's history that we'll never know because of these treasure seekers and wanting to take home a mummy to stick in their living room or whatever, versus science and knowledge. And again, it's kind of interesting that when you talk about tradition and modern, you have that same conversation between the characters. The older scientists who's saying, no, we're here to learn the knowledge. We're not here to take the treasures and take them home. And exploit that. It's meant to learn. So there's a lot of interesting themes that speak to the values that I hold with regards to Egypt and my love of that country. So for me, it's not a particularly scary movie, but it's one that I absolutely love.
So and it's filled with romance, and it's spoopy, and it's history. And
oh yeah, it's got all that good stuff.
Everything.
Any excuse to add an original Universal monster to the queue?
Like, come on.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.